Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing really well and I have an amazing announcement for each one of you. I am coming up with a full day power pack marathon where we will be covering consolidation, internal reconstruction, amalgamation, joint venture and associates to ensure that you are fully prepared and ready for your upcoming examination. So that is one announcement which I would like to make, and in this video I'll also be talking about the three things that you should keep in mind while revising for advanced accounting paper if you are writing the exams in September 24 attempt, right? Now what we are trying to do is, how do we break down the 3-day revision, what all topics you should be revising on which day, and I'm also sharing chapter by chapter approach to cover those topics before the examination. How much depth should you go, or should you do all the problems, or to what extent should you be revising? To ensure that you don't miss the marathon, please like this video and also subscribe to this channel so that the day when I am live on 5th of September, all of you can enjoy and revise those 5 crucial and important chapters for your examination. So what we'll be doing is we'll be covering amalgamation, internal reconstruction, consolidation, associates and joint ventures, and the date is 5th of September. We'll start at 10 a.m. and in the entire day we'll not only be revising this, we will also be covering some important questions that you should be referring for your examination. So that is the first thing. Second thing, how should you plan for the 3 days before the examination? See, when it comes to advanced accounting, one advantage we have is we have extra time. For all other subjects, we talk about 1.5-day revision strategy. For advanced accounting, I always suggest 3 days revision strategy. Now, what you should do in 3 days is, on day 1, on the first day of revision, you should start with preparation of financial statements, and in this chapter you should only be doing the format. You should revise and remember the format. So what about adjustments? See, final account adjustments you have been doing since your 11th standard, 12th standard foundation. So there is no great new adjustment that you should be aware of. You should be aware of what is the format of the P&L, what is the format of the balance sheet. Be careful about the notes and how to classify current, non-current, what are the additional disclosures to be made. For example, under debtors, the aging requirement is there. So all of these is what you have to revise. Don't waste time in preparing final accounts or preparing balance sheet and P&L before the examination. So first thing, I hope it is clear. For preparation of financial statement, format plus focus on notes, because if the trial balance is tallied, you as chartered accountants have the ability to prepare the P&L and also the balance sheet. So no need to worry about that. That's the first thing. Then immediately after this, you complete cash flow statements. Even here, just think about those adjustments where you found difficulty. A lot of students struggle with provision for taxation related amendment or adjustment. Now that I have already covered in a separate video. If you are still confused, you can have a look at that. But apart from that, in AS3 also, what is important is format and classification of items, which is operating, which is investing, which is financing. If you are able to do that, you will be able to manage the cash flow statement as well. Now in cash flow statement, one more thing that you have to keep in mind is, whenever there are adjustments like purchase of plant and machinery, provision for taxation, right, deriving how much profit has been earned when the P&L is not given, always prefer preparing a lecture format. So these two you should be able to complete in 1.5 to 2 hours time. More than that, I don't suggest you to give for revision. Then after that, immediately jump into these 5 topics in the order in which you want and try to complete on day 1. So in day 1, these 2 chapters and these 5 chapters should be completed, right? So about 10 to 12 hours of time. Now the question is, should we do all the problems in the study material? Not required. Only those problems where you found difficulty while preparing for the classes, or while solving past exam papers, or while solving RTPs, just go back to those questions only. No need to solve everything. For example, in amalgamation of companies or in consolidation, if you say, if you can calculate goodwill properly, if you can do the analysis of profit properly, after that there is no great rocket science in adding the balance sheet and showing a consolidated balance sheet. Okay, so that is one thing you have to keep in mind. So after that, your day 1 is completed. In day 2, take the simpler standards, because day 1 has been very heavy. Day 2, take the simpler standards like AS1, AS2, AS10, it's a simple standard. AS26 is a simple standard. AS29, AS9, right? Then comes AS4, AS5, and if possible, if you have time, complete AS18. These are the simple standards. But when these standards are tested in the examination, you can score good marks. For example, in AS2, what is there? Lower of cost on net realizable value. And then they will give some raw materials, some work in progress, some finished goods. You just have to calculate the value of inventory. Very simple standard, but can fetch you 5 to 7 marks if at all it is tested. Same way AS10, property, plant and equipment. You have been doing since foundation. What is great about this? Only complication you may find is revaluation model, right? Apart from that, some of the students find difficulty in decommissioning liability. Apart from this, there is nothing complicated in the standard. So complete these remaining highlighted standards, and if time permits, try to cover a couple of more standards, and then in the last day complete the balance standards and your buyback of securities and accounting for branches, right? If time is not sufficient, or if you are not able to complete everything, you still have the day before the examination to revise. Now I'll tell you chapter by chapter approach to cover those standards, right? Now applicability of AS, it is just a thing where you have to remember the dates. Then coming to specific standards, disclosure of accounting policies, just remember the 3 fundamental principles and what is the definition of accounting policies and when we can change accounting policies. That's it. Okay, apart from that, there is nothing specific you have to focus on. When it comes to accounting standard 2 on inventories, remember what is the formula of valuation of inventories. Have a quick overview of weighted average and FIFO, lower of cost and net realizable value, and try to look at 2-3 complex questions. Now one thing all of you have to keep in mind is you will not be doing all the questions again while revising, otherwise it is not a revision. So when I say revision, are you able to remember the important concepts of AS2, and are you able to solve the complex questions of AS2? A lot of students, what they do is, revision means again they will start from scratch. They will try to do all the problems or read all the problems. That is not the idea for revision. When you are revising, if I am talking about AS2, I will be bothered about how to calculate the cost, what is included, what is excluded, how to calculate NRV, and in the given scenario, how do I do the valuation? Then what do I do about joint products and byproducts, right? If you cover these and the questions, it is more than sufficient. Then property, plant and equipment, here also focus should be more on revaluation and decommissioning. Remaining things, what is included, what is excluded, all of your champions by now, so no need to worry about them. Again, have a look at a couple of questions based on revaluation and decommissioning. Remaining items, what is to be included in the cost of PPE, what is not to be included in the cost of PPE, that all of you are well aware of. Then government grants, most of the times the question that is tested is based on the refund of government grant. So please make sure you are thorough with the accounting treatment when there is a refund of government grant. If it is credited, if the grant is credited to the asset, then what is the treatment? If it is credited to deferred income, then what is the treatment? If it is in the nature of promoter's contribution, then what is the treatment? If you are thorough with this standard is pretty manageable, right? Now, one more thing that I want to tell all of you is, don't waste too much of time in remembering disclosures at this point of time. Whatever you can remember is perfectly fine. Apart from that, don't try to break your head for remembering all the disclosures. Okay, so that is one more thing. Then borrowing cost. Now, in case of borrowing cost, what happens is when there is a general borrowing, this is where students struggle a lot. Whenever there is a general borrowing, how do we calculate the weighted average cost, and how do we use that weighted average cost for calculation of capitalization? So if you are thorough with general borrowing, specific borrowing is pretty straightforward. Just take the amount, multiply it with the rate and calculate the borrowing cost. So focus specifically on general borrowings. Okay. Then intangible asset is more or less similar to AS10. Here remember the 5 conditions for capitalizing the development expenditure. Okay, so that is one thing you have to keep in mind. Then leases, slightly complicated. You must be able to calculate the liability, the asset component. Okay, prepare the table and calculate the expense, that is the interest expense and depreciation. So more complication happens when there is a lessee accounting for finance leases. Also sale and leaseback transaction. These 2 topics you must be focusing more when you are revising. Then when it comes to provision, contingent liabilities and assets, remember the definitions of provisions, contingent liability, contingent assets, and remember the accounting treatment. Okay, that is more than sufficient. When it comes to employee benefits, most important is your long-term plans, long-term employee benefit plans, how to calculate the liability and how to calculate the assets and the current service cost that has to go to the P&L. So that is what is important. Revenue recognition is more a principle based standard. So here be more clear about how do I recognize revenue, when can I recognize revenue, and look at specific cases of when there is, let's say, a consignment sale, how much of revenue can be recognized, or when it is commission, how much of revenue can be recognized. If the control is passed, not passed, how much of revenue can be recognized. And here in this chapter, I suggest you to go through past papers. Compilation of past papers is available. So go through these past papers so that you get to know how should you present the answer in the examination. Most likely, this will be a theory thing. Same thing you can also do for ACE 29 as well. So here, in these two, do definitely have a look at the past exam questions. Then when it comes to construction contracts, it is pretty simple, but the complexity arises when you have to do the accounting for more than 2 years. Okay, so here how to calculate the completion percentage, right? Then if there is a loss, how to do the accounting. A lot of students I've seen that whenever there is an expected loss, they get confused as to how do we incorporate that in the P&L. So these two aspects you have to be thorough with and ensure you complete the questions related to this. Then accounting for investment, very, very important. Questions are generally straightforward, but because they give multiple buy transactions, sell transactions to calculate the dividend income or the interest income, that makes it difficult. But accounting for investment, have a look at last 3 or 4 past exam questions. If you are able to solve them, you are thorough with this topic. Classification between short term and long term is not a challenge. Then how do we value long term investments, short term investments, that is also not a challenge. Working the actual ledger account for investments, that can become a challenge. Then foreign exchange, pretty simple and straightforward, but just the thing that when it comes to foreign currency monetary items translation difference account, a question on this you must necessarily do it so that you are prepared for the examination. Income taxes, be clear with concepts of when do we recognize deferred tax asset and deferred tax liability. If you are able to do that, you will be able to handle this chapter. Contingencies and P&L, this is more about knowing the concept of each of these terms, prior period items and changes in accounting policy, and how do we do the respective accounting treatment. Segment reporting, just be careful about the 10% test and how do we do the reporting, primary reporting format, secondary reporting format. Related party disclosures, here important is definition and disclosure. Earnings per share, it's a standard chapter where most of the focus should go to theoretical ex rights price related to rights issue. This is where students struggle. Otherwise, for bonus issue, you have to do a retrospective adjustment, and if it is a fresh issue of shares, you have to do a weighted average. That you'll be able to handle. This is where students generally struggle when it comes to earnings per share. Discontinuing operation is more about disclosures. Not very much focus should be given at this point of time. This also is more for disclosures. Impairment of assets, be careful about calculations of impairment, how to calculate value in use, how to calculate the recoverable amount, right? That is where you have to put focus on. Now, one thing that I want to tell all of you is, if any of these standards you have not done or you are not comfortable with, don't break your head at this point of time. Even if you are 80 to 85% ready for all of these standards, it is more than sufficient. Okay, this is not the time to make that 85% to 100%. Instead, it is time to put 100% efforts on this 80 to 85%. Okay, so don't try to make this 100. Give 100% efforts on this, and that will be more than sufficient. Then, when it comes to preparation of financial statements, as I told you, just be clear with the format. Cash flow statements, also be clear with the format. Buyback of securities, your tests. That is what you have to be clear with. Accounting for branches for different categories. Each category, one problem you should try to solve. And these anyways will be covering up when it comes in the marathon, right? So that is how you should approach your revision. And any question which you had found difficult in your first time preparation, please go back to that question and ensure you revise that question properly before the examination. Okay. Now, if you do all of these and if you utilize your 3 days to the examination properly, I'm 100% confident that you will be able to score 60 plus marks. Okay. Then how do we handle MCQs? All the concepts that you have learned during this revision will help you to practice MCQs. If you want, you can practice MCQs on our app. Then One more last thing. While solving questions on financial statements, preparation of financial statement, preparation of financial amalgamation, internal reconstruction, and consolidation, don't be scared if you get a new adjustment. I'm requesting, don't get scared if you get a new adjustment. If you are able to handle other adjustments, prepare the combined balance sheet and the balance sheet of the amalgamated entity. You will be able to score, if it is a 14 marks question, you will be able to score 8 to 10 marks. So you can do it at the end. I'm not saying that. You can do it at the end. But don't leave the question because there is one tricky adjustment which you are not able to handle. I hope you are able to get some insights on how to handle each of these chapters before the examination, and I'll see you on 5th of September with a thorough proper revision of these 5 important chapters where a lot of students are scared as to how do we revise that before the examination. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Do share it with your friends, and if you have come till this point of time, do like